Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 205 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hello, hello. We are a father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. And today we'll be talking about our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, coming off of a big game against Michigan, which unfortunately did not go Nebraska's way, but we also did not get blown out. And you were actually there in attendance for the game, so you can talk about some of that cool game day atmosphere that we had.
Yeah.
And we'll also be diving into some news in the world of college volleyball and what's going on in the wider world of college football.
Sounds like a good plan. Let's get to it.
All right. Well, we got to stick with our tradition and crack open a cold beverage here. I've got myself one of these Golden Road Mango Carts.
And I am drinking a Labatt Blue, one of my last Labatts that I got to bring with me from Michigan.
Ooh, I always love a good Labatt. All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
So, yes, we got to kick things off, of course, with the Michigan game. We gave our usual predictions on the previous podcast, and you predicted that we would get beat pretty soundly, 38-17. Well, I predicted that it would be a closer game, but that we would lose 31-27. And the final score ended up being 30-27. So I was pretty much right on the money with my prediction there.
Yes, you were.
I was just going to say, to give Vegas credit, I think they had it around 1.5 or 2.5 points. So, it ended up being 3 points, I guess. But yeah, Vegas was pretty close too. They knew it would be a close game.
Well, but the reasons though are what I would love to get into here a little bit now. Because
yes,
anybody who watched the game, and even those who I talked to before the game who were asking for my expectation and prediction, they've all come back to me and said, you were dead on with exactly how this was going to play out. The only reason that Michigan didn't blow us out way worse than the final score was because their offensive coordinator, did not call a very good football game. Their offensive coordinator did not do what would have maximized their success. In addition, their team made some horrible mistakes at just the right times to keep Nebraska in it.
That's true.
Now, and so if those things, if they execute more cleanly, and if their offensive coordinator actually runs the football instead of trying to throw the ball all over the yard in the second half, they likely beat us comfortably by 3 scores.
But because here was my reaction after the game. Because on the one hand, I felt similar to you that we were clearly outclassed on both sides of the line of scrimmage, on offense and defense. And Michigan was able to get some massive runs on us that gave them way easy points. And the score could have been blown out of proportion. On the other hand, we left 14 points on the board ourselves, of points that we could have scored. So on the other hand, maybe we should have won by 10 points,
Given how Michigan played that game, given how their offensive coordinator chose to call the game, and the dumb mistakes like the taunting calls and other things that happened at a time that hurt Michigan's chances. Given all of that, if none of that changes, you're absolutely right. We should have won the game. We absolutely should have won the game, and that's the thing. My point is that I believe that the argument I made in last week's podcast about the fact that we were competitive with Michigan in almost every area except for, my argument was defensive line particularly, but also offensive line and running back. And I think those things absolutely all kind of came true. Okay.
Well, I was going to say we really emphasized the defensive line concerns and how Michigan could just run it up our throats the whole game.
Right.
But in actuality, the bigger concern that we probably should have talked about more was our offensive line against their defensive line, because
right.
Dylan was getting pressured pretty much, 80%
yeah,
of the time.
absolutely. And that's the thing. I mean, when you watch that offense and defensive line play, it was very clear who the more physically dominant team was. And the only reason they didn't score more points was because of themselves. Not necessarily exclusively because of us. Now, having said that, I am a Nebraska fan, so I will also admit that the problem is when you have a defensive line like we have, then the whole premise of your defense is based on guessing, and we guessed pretty well. And even forget the defensive line deficiency. If we just tackle, okay, the number of times that a missed tackle led to a 3rd and 9 or greater first down conversion, especially in the second half, there were probably 5 of those
Well,
where
that
Michigan got a first down because we whiffed on a tackle. They would throw a screen pass. We would have a guy right there, and the guy would whiff on the tackle, and then the runner gets the first down.
right.
Those things happen so many times in the second half, and that has nothing to do with the defensive line. But it does have to do with the fact that because our defensive line is weak, we have to blitz, we have to twist, we have to do all these things where we're doing all these individual gap things where everybody has to be just right. And if anybody misses, there's no second level to recover, which is what leads to the big plays and to in the third and fourth quarters, the first downs on third down conversions or second
Well,
down conversions.
Well, yeah, I think some of those may have been second downs because actually, if you look at Michigan's third down, conversion rate, they were 4 of 12 on the day.
Right.
So they were not actually that great at converting the third downs when we got them in that situation.
But wait a minute, what did you say? 4 of 12.
Yep,
Four
4
of
of
12.
12. So
Well
that's
then,
30%.
well then they right, but they were 1 of 9, and then the last. So you're telling me the last 3 third downs they converted all 3 of them.
Okay, so you're saying late in the game they were on a
Exactly.
stretch. Okay,
Exactly. And almost every one of those plays was precipitated by a missed tackle by a Nebraska player who was quote where they were supposed to be, but was arriving out of control or literally arriving late so that they could not square up on the running back and secure a tackle, and ended up whiffing right past him. Right.
right.
So the point is that it is because of the defensive line and its ineffectiveness that the rest of the defensive scheme basically gets stressed to the point where everybody is on the edge of failure because we can't just line up and defend the line of scrimmage.
Right.
And so as I look at how this game played out, it very much played out exactly the way I thought it would. The criticism I would have of us is not so much that actually I've got to praise Coach Butler. I think his game plan was about as good as we could have come up with, right? Because we had guys in those spots, right? They were there. And
Right.
if they just make the tackles, then we probably win that football game, right?
Well, let me highlight this. So Michigan had 33 rushing carries for 286 yards in the game.
Right.
But what skews that is that 3 of those rushes were huge plays that went for touchdowns.
Yeah.
There was one for 37 yards, one for 75, and one for 54. And at least 1 or 2 of those, like you say, we had a guy, who could have made a tackle, but missed or got juked, and then that guy was off to the races, and it was an easy score. But if you take those 3 plays away, which I know is a big if because it was Michigan's dominance on the line that opened up those huge holes that let those big plays happen. But if you take those away, then that leaves them with 120 yards of rushing on 30 attempts. So that leaves them with an average of 4 yards per carry. So that goes to show that aside from the big runs that we just completely
Yep.
whiffed on that went for huge gains, we didn't actually do that badly against their running game.
I agree. I 100% agree with that. But again, I'm going to get back to the basic point. We were able to do that, average of 4 yards a carry by guessing. And you're taking out the points where we guessed the worst, okay, and
Right.
allowed these truck-like holes to be created, um, that were, so you can't just choose the ones when you guessed right. What I
Right.
want is a defensive line like we had last year, where we had two defensive tackles that could hold their own, and in fact, one or the other almost regularly demanded a double team so that the offensive line could not move the entire defensive line the way it did. Right? Then your linebackers can actually do work, and you can have a second level. Well, the way we're playing defense now, we really have no second level. If we guess wrong with how we do our individual fits, then we've got 220-pound linebackers, 235-pound linebackers trying to deal with either an offensive lineman coming at them who's 320 pounds, or a running back who's already through the hole, got momentum, and you're either a missed tackle or a juke, move by the running back away from giving up a massive play. And
Right.
that's going to be an Achilles heel that we are going to have the remainder of the season, right?
Right.
And that is a roster issue, and a more than anything else, it is a roster issue. I'm not even going to say it's that the scheme is wrong or anything like that, because clearly, I think by and large, we put ourselves in a decent position to win the football game relative to that. But we just simply did not have the horses. And I would agree with you, Alex, that I was concerned about the offensive line, but not nearly to the extent that I was the defensive line. And yet the offensive line, especially our tackles, got twisted like turnstiles on a number of plays, that
Yeah.
caused Dylan to have no real chance to get rid of the football. I mean, it was 2 seconds and he was down.
To your point, yeah, because we're having to play this guessing game style of defense because of our roster holes that we have on that defensive line, we have a
Correct.
consistency problem where, like you say, when you guess wrong, it blows up big in your face.
Correct. We can't line up and just play straight defense and then add a blitz here or there, because if we just played straight up, we would get blown off the ball.
Right. But then, once again, right, looking at their passing yardage, they went for 23 passes, completed 12 of them for 105 yards. Now, admittedly, a couple of those, right, were very close to being catchable balls and were dropped or missed by, their receivers. Some of that's self-inflicted, but also we did
Yep.
generally a good job covering them. And to your point, their offensive coordinator wasn't just going for the running game. They were trying to diversify things and get their quarterback to try to get into a rhythm, and we were able to prevent him from doing that for the most part.
Correct. Exactly. And our secondary held up fairly well. The other thing that, on rewatching it, as we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, I was there at the game, and sometimes it's hard to see everything that's going on when it's live. I mean, you're wrapped up in the cheering and all the energy of the crowd, and that was a great time, and it was wonderful. But one thing I was noticing, and I really wanted to watch in film, was what Michigan did, from an offensive standpoint that was really, really good. Was they figured out that, okay, because we're going to be bringing extra people because our defensive line is suspect, we're going to be playing our fair share of man to man. We occasionally played zone, but we played quite a bit of man up. Okay, if you're going to do man to man, you run motion prior to the snap, and you run motion across the formation, and oftentimes one of our linebackers, or one of our strong safety, our tight safety, is going to follow that movement from one side of the field to the other. And when they do that, not only do you expose that, yep, you're playing man to man, but also it takes that guy out of the box. So we would end up at the snap of the ball, literally having maybe one linebacker behind a group of 4 people on the line of scrimmage. So we would have 5 people in the box. You can't stop a running game consistently when you only have 5 people in the box.
Right. To focus on the offense for a minute, we ended up with a rushing stat that looks bad, 31 rushing attempts for 43 yards. However, that stat is very much skewed by the fact that Dylan was sacked 7 times, and those sacks detract from the rushing total. So, we did better than that on rushing, but certainly the passing game is clearly what was working and what we went to more often than not. And on that front, we were 30 of 41 for 308 yards. So despite the fact that Dylan got sacked 7 times and what constantly had pressure in his face, I thought he performed extremely well. Aside from the one interception he threw where he missed the fact that there was like a corner, in position, and he missed that in his, pre-snap examination of the field and threw an interception. Aside from that, I thought Dylan really was exceptional in this game. And if our offensive line could have given him just a little bit more protection, we probably would have won the game.
I'm in agreement with you, Alex. I think you're correct. If none of the other things change, and they don't change their Michigan does not change their play calling scheme, right? Then I 100% agree with you. I think Dylan played quite well. Definitely you can argue that there are some downs where he held onto the ball too long, and that led to some sacks. But out of those 7, I would say that's maybe 2, and the other 5 were offensive line related sacks, right? So, and he did make a few bad decisions that actually didn't cost us, that could have cost us, right? There were a couple of passes he threw that probably should have been picked off, but weren't. So he got a little lucky. But frankly, any quarterback that throws the ball 40 times in a game is probably going to throw a couple that he regrets and gets away with it because the defense doesn't catch it or whatever, right? So that's just the nature of the quarterback play. So I would agree. If I'm evaluating Dylan's effort in the game, I think he did quite well. And again, his ability to audible plays and things of that nature is excellent. Another thing I want to make sure I get in, Alex, before I forget it, and this kind of fast forwards maybe a little bit in our discussion, but I just want to make sure I say it because I'm often critical of Coach Rule, and that I say he's a great coach. I love 95% of what he does in terms of how he leads the program, the decisions he makes, but he's not a great game day coach. And yet I have to admit that one, his handling of the end of half situation at the halftime that led to the Hail Mary opportunity was a stroke of genius and took advantage of a mistake by Michigan's coaching staff.
Right. I was thinking that as we discussed on the last podcast, Sharon Moore, Michigan's real head coach, was not able to be there on the sidelines, or participate in this game, which, as we said, for the most part, doesn't matter much, or if anything was a motivator for Michigan. But in that specific situation, I think you felt it, because I felt like their interim head coach guy was just kind of letting us, run the clock down, didn't even try to call a timeout or try to get the ball back. Correct. Or whatever. And so then, Rule takes the timeout with 1 second left, and it's like, hey, let's go for a Hail Mary.
Right. That was a mistake by them. No doubt about it. That was a mistake.
And it's interesting that, I don't know if they showed this in the stadium, but in the TV version, you could see that Dana and Matt were talking about it, on the sideline, before Matt called the timeout. It seemed like Dana was like, let's just go into halftime. And Matt was the one who kind of overruled him and said, let's go for the Hail Mary.
Correct. There was absolutely Yes, there was definitely some loud dialogue, I think, probably going on between those two at that moment. And maybe Dana didn't fully grasp what he was wanting to do. He was waiting to see if Michigan would call the timeout, and when they didn't, it was like, no, 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 we need to do this, you know. So I love that aggressive decision, and also, you know, the onside kick at the end of the game. After our final touchdown, you know, that was really well executed. Michigan just did a great job and got the ball, but that was a tough onside kick that bounced pretty attractively for a, a successful onside kick. You know, that's usually what you're looking for, but Michigan just handled it really well. Um, and but but at the same time, I will have to concede that if we replayed that game 10 times, and the offenses and defenses played more cleanly on both sides of the ball, Michigan wins comfortably. Michigan made enough mistakes and made enough bad decisions in terms of how they executed their offense, and how their team behavior was as bad as I've seen in Memorial Stadium since watching, a Colorado game. Okay,
Right.
I mean, you have no idea how many times it wasn't even on the TV, and you might have heard the boos in the audience when almost every kickoff or kickoff return, the Michigan players were knocking over Nebraska players after the play was over, and they never got a flag. It happened 4 times, 3 of them right in front of me,
Wow.
because I was in the north end zone, and it was never called. And our players were going up and trying to talk with the refs, saying, "Are you seeing this?" Literally, because and it's based on kind of a tradition, if you will. Most good special teams coaches, they require their kickoff coverage team to run through to the end zone, no matter what. Right. So if the other team calls a fair catch or the ball goes out of the back of the end zone, you still run till you touch the touchdown line, the end zone line, right? That's what you do as a kickoff coverage guy. Because it's if nothing else, a lot of the times those special teams guys, that might be their only role that they play regularly on the team, right? And so that's a good exercise, gets them stretched out. They're ready for the next time they have to do it. Well, once the whistle's blown dead, the guy's called the fair catch. Um, you tend to relax because you're just running, right? You're just running to complete the job, get to the end zone, and then one of the deep backs for Michigan would just stick his arm out and pop a guy, and he'd just go flying because he was not ready for the contact, right? Wasn't expecting the guy to do that, and that happened multiple times, and just cheap shots, just a lot of cheap stuff that was also going on after the plays, and just bad. And I've never seen anything like it. Even my good friend, who is a Michigan fan, up there in Michigan, he and I, in my conversation with him, he acknowledged it as well. He says, "I've never seen a Michigan team behave that badly."
I see. Well, you're right. They definitely did not show that on the TV because I didn't
No,
notice that. But of course, there was the, 3rd and 17 or whatever it was
right,
that didn't go our way, and it was fourth and forever. And
right. The taunting. He was an idiot.
and speaking of positivity, once again, we only had 3 penalties for 9 yards. Because I think one of those was, on the goal line or whatever, so it wasn't a full 5 yards. We
Yep.
had 351 total yards of offense to their 391. We had more time of possession, partially because they scored so fast on certain drives and stuff. We had one completed field goal along with one missed one, which you really would like to have that missed one back because that's the 3 points that could have tied the game. I wanted to ask you real quick, that first drive of the game where we were cooking on offense, and we went all the way down, and it was second down and 3, and the first down was at the 4 yard line. So it was one of those situations where you're in the red zone, and if you get the first
Yep.
down, then you're in great position to get the touchdown because it would be, first and goal from the 4 yard line. So we'd had a nice run to get 7 yards on first down. Then 2nd and 3, Dana calls for a pass play, and a receiver is actually open, but Dylan just overthrows him a little bit, and
Right.
that ends up being an incomplete pass. And then we run it on third down, get barely anything, and go for it on fourth down, 4th and 2, to try to be aggressive, to get that first down, to try to get the touchdown,
Right.
and we don't get it. So
Right.
my question is, even though on 2nd and 3, and you're thinking, okay, even if we don't get this pass, 3rd and 3 is still where you want to be, right? You're on schedule with that timing or whatever. I personally would have preferred for us to maybe be a little more conservative, but just get that first down and run it there
Yes.
on 2nd and 3rd. Because even if you only get half of it, then that means you're on third down and 1.5 yards, which is obviously much
Right.
more doable. But on the other hand, on the second down play, the guy was open, even though it is a bit of a tough, arcing pass for Dylan to make. If he had just gotten that on the money, it would have been a touchdown. So what's your thoughts on that sequence?
Okay. Your description is I think very accurate. My argument would be somewhat similar to what I think you're saying as well. That I believe the the risk reward, meaning the possibility of that fade. He threw that flat fade, right? You're only 7 yards out of the end zone. You're throwing a fade route, so there's not a lot of room that the defender needs to defend, right? There's not that much room left on the field, and so to um, complete that pass, that particular pass play has to be perfect. The pass has to be in the right location. The timing has to be just right. If the defender is able to knock your wide receiver off of his stride or whatever, then the timing between him and the quarterback is disrupted. It's why that kind of a fade route doesn't work that often, right? Oftentimes, especially if the guy you're throwing it to is not a big bodied wide receiver, which it was not, right? We weren't throwing it to, our wide receiver who was 6'3". We were throwing it to a wide receiver who was not. So all of those factors, I would say, lead to that being a bad play call on that 2nd and 3. I would have far preferred them to reverse that and run run the ball on second down and run the ball on third down. And then if you didn't make it on either of those two, hopefully you'd be somewhat closer to the first down marker, and then you get them thinking that your whole focus is to just get over that line and get the first down, and then we'll get the touchdown later, and then you throw it on fourth down. You do that high risk passing or some other kind of a pass play when they're not expecting it, right in the end zone. Or they're not that they're not expecting it, but it's less of a top of the mind likelihood. So I think it was a bad play call on that 2nd and 3.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we're in agreement there. No big surprise.
We are 100%. We are one hundred
Um,
percent in agreement there, and it really and that was huge.
yeah. And just real quick, did want to mention, despite what we said on the last podcast where we thought Terrence Crawford, after his big fight, oh, he's so busy, he's recovering, he probably wouldn't be there for the game. But sure enough, he was, and he ran out there on the field with the guys, which was really cool. Can you talk a little bit about that and just the general game day environment?
Oh yeah, that was great. Well, we were also honoring our 1995 national championship team, and so they came out of the tunnel first. And I don't know if that was shown on TV or not, where all the 95 guys who came out collectively. Frank Solich was there with them, and he came out with the 95 guys. And Tommy Frazier's daughter is now a cheerleader at Nebraska, and so he was one of the guys at the front of the 95 group, and he came out and he and his daughter met kind of at the there at the goal line, and he gave her a big hug and stuff, and it was just really cool. And people were going crazy. It was really neat, and they were showing highlights of the 95 team on the big screens and stuff. It was really neat. And then of course they did the whole Terrence Crawford thing, and they did a great video montage of. Did you see the video montage where they were having some footage of the football team, this year's football team, our previous games of this year, and Terrence Crawford's fight, and some of the hits that he had during his fight, and And the one where he took the hit and smiled, they got that one in. It was very cool. It was,
Okay.
and the place was going nuts. It was pretty cool. The other thing I would say that was really neat in all the years I've been in that stadium, the flyover was amazing. The flyover, I don't remember. It was 4 jets, number one, that's a lot, and then, um, and they were as low. I mean, I could have swore they were going to hit one of the light poles. I mean, they were low and loud because they were so low. So when they came over the top of that stadium, my God, it was awesome. I mean, it just made your back, the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It was really, really cool.
Right. Well, because I know it was a big recruiting weekend for us. And
Yes.
obviously the results of the game didn't quite go the way we wanted, but hey, we didn't get blown out. We were competitive with them,
Right.
came down to the onside kick at the end, and the
That's right.
ambiance was great. So hopefully those kids had a good time.
Yep, I totally agree. I think it was a pretty darn good environment for them to experience. I think the overall weekend and all that they saw. I can't imagine that players weren't impressed with the overall thing, and also sensing that, hey, this is a Michigan team that 2 years ago won the national title, and Nebraska just took them down to the wire and lost by 3. Right?
Right.
We were kicking
Yep.
an onside kick with 1 minute and 40 seconds to go. So I can't look at this and say, oh, this was an abject failure, which I was concerned it was going to be, right? I was predicting that. And it
Yep.
didn't happen. So I'm not happy with the loss, but I'm accepting of what transpired. So
Yep. Well, and obviously based on my prediction, it went about the way I expected, although certainly not the way I expected with the crazy big plays on both sides and the Hail Mary and all that stuff. That was all wild. Um,
yep.
I was anticipating that we would lose to Michigan before the season started, so I can't be too mad about the loss. We now have a bye week to lick our wounds and prepare ourselves for a game against Michigan State, who just got off of a loss to USC. And it is a home game. So we'll talk more about that game next week as we get into the preparations. But
Right.
the gist of it for me is that this middle stretch of our season, these next 4 games, are going to decide how our season turns out, because we have some tougher games at the end of the year. So I'm like, these 4 games are all winnable, and we really need to win them. And I
Right.
think if we can come out of that stretch at 7-1, I'll feel much better about that last third of our season than if we don't.
Yeah, I would say 7-1 or 6-2. I don't know that. I mean, I don't think my expectation is, oh, we have to go 4-0 for this to build to ultimately having a reasonably successful season. Because again, my definition of a successful season is going to be 7 and 8 wins is great. 9 would be absolutely spectacular, right? And we've got to play Penn State at Penn State. I mean, let's be
Right.
real. We're not going to be the favorite in that game, right? But if you look at Minnesota, that's a team that I was extremely concerned about. Still, I'm concerned about, but maybe I feel a little better about our chances. Right now, the opposite of that, Maryland, who I thought we would have a chance of winning because they were going to have a freshman quarterback just like the freshman we just played, but turns out that guy's spectacular. And
Right.
so that Maryland team is a very different team than what I thought they were going to be.
Yep. So yeah, obviously we'll talk about that in the future podcasts here.
Right, right.
Real quick, we wanted to just mention the girls on the volleyball team. They had a tough match against Creighton, their local Nebraska rival, which they managed to win 3-2 in the 5th set, and then followed it up with a 3-0 win over Arizona. Got some big matches against Michigan and Maryland this week. So the girls are still undefeated, still number 1, but they had a scare for sure.
Yes, and not completely unexpected. Although, I mean, most people would have not said, "Oh, I'm predicting a 5 setter." But if you look at the recent history of that rivalry, um, 3 of the last 5 years that we have played Creighton, it has gone to 5. And this was a match where we did not play well. It was pretty clear that we had maybe not spent as much time preparing our game plan for their specific tendencies, and we had focused more on ourselves and just trying to make ourselves play better. Where they had clearly scouted us extremely well, and that was impressive on Creighton's standpoint. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Creighton like 5-5 at the end of this season. Maybe they're 6-5 now. I don't remember, but they've lost 5 setters to like Nebraska and KU and Wisconsin. I mean, the list of their resume, even though their record isn't very good, Creighton is probably a top 15 volleyball team in the NCAA right now.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. And then in terms of the big games from week 4 of college football, we gave our prediction for a big one in the Big Ten, which got a lot of hype, which is, of course, Illinois, Indiana. You went ahead and said that Illinois was going to win 34-27. Well, I thought Indiana would win, but it would be close, 24-21. And it ended up going Indiana's way, but way worse than any of us thought, 63-10.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. But it'll be interesting to see how the Indiana program and team performs throughout the rest of the season. But clearly, they have been able to, for 2 years in a row now, put together a roster full of new players that have been brought in through the portal and have translated to a very, very highly effective team. And, people are going to try to figure out what he's doing, how he's doing it, because he is doing it with less money, with less NIL fanfare, and yet securing useful, usable, talented football players. He's doing it better than anybody. He being Signetti at Indiana. Now it'll be interesting to see how Illinois responds to this, because that is certainly not what they expected.
Right.
And so what happens to that football team now? Because they have to turn around and play a very, very difficult game this week.
Well, I was curious, so I looked at the stats, because you think with a score like that, did Illinois turn it over a bunch of times? But they were only -1 on the turnover margin. You look at their rushing yards, their official stat is 2 rushing yards on 20 attempts. I'm sure that was affected by sacks that their quarterback took. But regardless, goes to show that Indiana's run defense is very good, and they were able to run it on them for 300 yards themselves.
Right. They got ahead of Illinois so quickly that Illinois abandoned any attempt at balance and probably was trying to throw it all over the yard when they did have the ball. And then if they're, so things kind of snowballed on Illinois.
I mean, they have 25 passing attempts and 20 running attempts. So they were actually relatively balanced, all things considered.
Well, yeah, but do the math. If that's true, that's 45 plays. So if you're looking at that tape right now, how many plays did Indiana have?
Well, yeah, no, they
not talking about yardage. I'm just saying, how many plays did they have?
Right. 49 plus 23, 72.
So they had almost 25 more plays than Illinois did.
Well, yeah, and they crushed them on time of possession, 40 minutes to 20. So, yeah.
Right. So that means Indiana just didn't let them get very many first downs, didn't let them sustain any drives, and they did the same. When they had the ball, they did possess it.
Yeah. On the other hand, in the Big Ten, this was quite a surprising score. Maryland beat Wisconsin 27-10. Making me regret for the first time that we don't have Wisconsin on our schedule this year. Usually they're a demon for us, but this is the one year I wish we were playing them.
Yes, exactly. I got to say that I'm not like shocked or anything that Maryland won, but I am shocked the way that Maryland won.
Yeah, well, it was 20-0 at halftime, so it's not like Maryland pulled away late or something. They were dominating the game. They got a big interception. They blocked a field goal. They blocked a punt of Wisconsin. And Wisconsin scored a touchdown, their only touchdown of the game, with 30 seconds left in the game. So For most of the game, they were down like 20-3, 27-3, and you could hear fans booing in the stadium when I was watching the highlights. It's bad. It's bad there.
Right. Oh, I know. And again, you look at their schedule,
Yeah.
and it doesn't get easier for them. So it's going to be a tough year, and a year where the AD at Wisconsin's going to have a lot of patience and really stand behind his guy, or he's going to be compelled to make a change. And it sounded like if they wanted to make a change, it's going to cost them just for Fickle, $25 million or something along those lines, plus all of his assistants and all the other. We've talked about that issue. I really speculated that there would be less of this, and so far that is not coming true. Athletic directors seem to be convinced that they can make this decision where they're spending $50 million of an athletic department's money to do that. And the only thing I can think of is that athletic directors are looking at it and saying that because of the changes in the sport, you can't sit by and wait for things to settle out and decide what you want to do. You got to pull the trigger and go now with a change and get going in a new direction and build that enthusiasm so you can keep your donors and your fan base excited about the future. So even though it costs a lot of money, it's the right thing for them to do in their minds anyway.
Right. Well, I almost wonder, I just thought of this, but maybe it's like since we're in this new era with the revenue share and everything, and everyone's expecting that like certain programs won't be able to sustain this revenue share splitting long term, right? Because of the added expense. And if you're adding NIL deals on top of that and everything else to try to get the really good
Right.
players. So it's
Right.
almost like we're putting all this money into this arms race right now while the getting's still good, because
Right.
eventually the winners of this new system will settle out and the rich will get richer, and you'll just get left behind if you're not part of that group.
Correct. I think that is a very good summary, and I think that's true. I think this is a critical moment in collegiate sports if you hope to continue to play the sport at the highest level. I think that as people realize that they don't have a chance to compete, there's going to be a lot of schools that are going to just raise their hand and they're going to start having side discussions, and a big chunk of them is going to make the decision to kind of step aside,
Yeah.
and they're going to go and create their own new organization with a whole new set of rules that probably are not going to be nearly as lucrative for the athletes, which means that athletes who are going for the money are going to remain at this higher level, but then there'll be a bunch of people who'll stay at the lower level. And it might be that that's how you salvage the NCAA. The NCAA ends up embracing that group, and they create a new set of rules that doesn't involve all of this open-ended NIL money and things like that.
Right.
But I don't know. Something's got to change because this is absolutely unsustainable, what we're experiencing right now.
Another surprising upset was Syracuse beating Clemson 34-21. I watched the replay of that game. Syracuse came up +2 on the turnover margin. A lot of the scoring for that game for both teams was done in the first half. It was kind of like, I think almost no points were scored in the third quarter. And interestingly, Syracuse actually got their quarterback hurt in the second half, so they had to bring in their backup guy, and yet they still won. And it was, I believe, at home for Clemson. So that's a tough loss for Dabo.
Big time tough loss. And, with some of the remarks he's made prior, because again, that was a team that was expected to be good going into the year, right? It wasn't a thing where they were looking at Clemson and saying, boy, they just don't have the talent that they used to have or whatever. This was actually a year where they were looking at it and saying, he's got returning starters, he's got lots of talent. We think he's going to be the best of the ACC, and it's just not showing up.
Well, and that's where, I think I saw some discussion about, Dabo's kind of attitude about it, and, that he's saying good things on the one hand, like, hey guys, we have the talent, just give me some patience, let me work out my coordinator situation. Maybe he needs to let go of a coordinator and make a change there. But sounds like in actuality, he's saying some kind of more defensive things and saying, I'm the one who's, won here for you guys, and, things like that, which, he has some right to say because he's, the most successful coach in their history and got them 2 national championships. But we know that he's been, defensive about the resistant to the NIL changes, and apparently he's cried in like these press conferences and stuff. So I don't know what's going on over there.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. I don't know how he climbs out of that unless he, at some point has a, one of those meetings where he's like, okay, I'm going to admit I was wrong, and I'm all in on this, transfer portal and NIL thing. And hey, Clemson Nation, I need your help. Let's get this thing going again, and then you just go from there.
Yeah. Did you see anything from the Memphis Arkansas game?
I was watching it, the score scroll while I was at the game. I was kind of surprised when I was seeing that Arkansas was struggling with Memphis.
Yeah. Well, it ended up being quite a heartbreaker if you're an Arkansas fan. For one, of those 31 points, only 3 of those came in the second half. They really struggled in the second half to score some points, but then they got the ball back after Memphis scored and actually drove it down. We're on the 9-yard line with 1:22 left in the game. So they're only down by 1 point, right? So you could have kicked a field goal there and gone up by 2. But they were obviously trying to score a touchdown to properly seal it, or at least, maybe get one more first down so you can wind the clock all the way down and then kick your field goal, right? And just give them no time to score again. But on the 9-yard line, they fumbled it. And so then it was game over.
Wow. 9 yards right there at the end.
Yep. 32-31 Memphis.
Arkansas has to play somebody big this week. I don't know who it is, but they have a tough outing this coming weekend as well.
I think you're right about that. And then the last upset, which maybe had the biggest consequences, was Tulsa beating Oklahoma State 19-12, just after Oklahoma State got drummed by Oregon.
Right.
I watched the highlights of that game as well. Yeah, that one was rough. Oklahoma State actually did okay defensively. Like, they forced Tulsa to kick it multiple times, but their offense just couldn't get anything going. Tulsa was actually -1 on the turnover margin, kicked 4 field goals. So, they were just able to stop Oklahoma State from getting much going offensively, and got a crucial 4th and 1 stop where Oklahoma State did drive it deep and was trying to be aggressive, and Tulsa shut that down. So that was a critical moment.
That's wild. Yeah. And again, the Gundy thing is surprising to me. So I don't know.
Yeah. We're recording this here on Tuesday, September 23rd. And just today, I texted you when I saw the news. It was announced that Mike Gundy was fired from Oklahoma State after being there for 20 years and being the winningest coach in Oklahoma State history. He's got a $15 million buyout, so he'll be just fine financially, leaving with a 170-90 record at Oklahoma State. And interestingly, so back in 2021, that was a very good year for Oklahoma State. They went 12-2. Then they had I think a 7-6 year in 2022, but then bounced back. 2023 were 10-4, and then disappointing year last year, 2024, they went 3-9. And I believe Mike Gundy took a pay cut and reduced his buyout as a result of that. And now they've gone off to a bad start. Like we mentioned, they got destroyed by Oregon the previous week. Now they lost to Tulsa, which is obviously unacceptable for a team of Oklahoma State's level. But he's only on year 2 in terms of bad years, right? Just the year before that, 2023, he got 10 wins, right?
Right. And he is with some reasonable consistency been a 9-10 win type of team in a lot of those years going back, a decade, right? So it's kind of a head scratcher to me because you know what? I believe Oregon is a top 5 team, maybe top 2 or 3. They're one of the best teams in college football this year. So getting blown out by them should be no big embarrassment, right? They're one of
Right.
the best teams in the country this year. So and so then you come home and you allow yourself to get beat. So basically, you allowed Oregon to beat you twice. You let a lesser team than yourself beat you because maybe your guys had a hangover from the beatdown they had against Oregon. It just seems like that's not yet enough data for an athletic director who was being objective to fire a guy who's been your coach for 21 years, except for the fact that he's been your coach for 21 years. And there have been a series of events over that 20 years where, there has been issues, tension within the athletic department administration and Mike Gundy. So that, he had not built the goodwill that you might have needed to sustain through, this particular thing. Mike Gundy is a very good coach, clearly, and somebody is going to pick him up in a heartbeat, I think.
Yeah. Well, like you say, it's a tough thing to do when you have 21 years of legacy at this program, and you're the winningest coach in their history and everything, and now you're getting dumped 4 games into the season, right? That's a tough way to end your legacy at this program. But like we say, it's a cutthroat world of college football in today's day and age, and he clearly was slipping in certain areas. But I don't know all the intricacies of what's going on behind the scenes there. But it does seem a little wild that they're letting him go, given the success he has had in the past 5 years. To me,
Yes, right.
yep. So we'll see how these other coaches that are on the hot seat, like Luke Fickle, and like we say, not hot seat, but maybe warm seat for someone like Dabo. We'll see how they approach things as they get into the tougher part of their schedules now, into the conference play.
Right.
And one other quick news piece we want to mention is that the ACC announced that they are also going to 9 conference games, as well as requiring 1 non-conference game to be a Power 4 team every year for the ACC. Because there's only 17 teams in the conference, one team will have to play 8 conference games because the math just doesn't work out for everyone to play 9. But clearly this is being motivated by the fact that SEC is also switching to it. So I'm glad that all of college football, at least the main Power 4, is now on the same page there.
Yeah, I'm so happy that this is happening. I think that will lead to a little bit more balance in scheduling. It will definitely negatively impact the number of attractive games in the preseason. I think the preseason is going to become much more vanilla going forward because starting next year with everybody going to 9 games, these schools that were able to play their 4 patsies are not going to be able to do that anymore. They're going to insist on 3 patsies because they're going to be worried about that 9th game against a legitimate conference opponent,
Well,
right? And
but you heard what I just said, right?
what?
Part of this ACC thing is 1 non-conference Power 4 team. So one of those 3 has to be a Power 4 team. So you can't just be 3 patsies in the ACC at
No,
least.
I get it. Well, and I understand that. And so everybody's going to be looking for the Power 4 teams that are lesser teams,
Well,
right?
okay.
They're gonna be hopeful of lining up that team that's at the bottom. And they're going to be seeking out, the teams that are at the bottom of the Big Ten or the teams that are at the bottom of the Big 12. If you're the
Right.
ACC,
Well, that's what Nebraska did, right, with Cincinnati, right? Like they're not a
right,
top
right.
Big 12 team.
Well, right. I don't know, but the bottom line is that I think it's going to cause there to be fewer highly attractive early season cross divisional type of games, as long as the playoff doesn't include some guarantees for the individual conferences.
Right. Yeah.
That's just a trade off that you have to have. Yep.
Yep. And then in terms of week 5 of college football, as we mentioned, Nebraska has a bye, so we won't be mentioning anything there. There are actually a lot of good games, especially in the SEC and the Big Ten this particular week. But we're going to focus on the two big boy ones for our predictions here, which is Oregon, Penn State, and Alabama, Georgia. It's a home game for Penn State and for Georgia. I feel like, given the struggles that Alabama has had so far this year and the fact that it is a home game for Georgia, I think I am going to go with Georgia, although I'm recalling that in Georgia's previous big game that we predicted, I thought that they would win more solidly, and it ended up being closer than I thought. So I do think, Alabama will come prepared, and since that is such a, heated rivalry in the South, but I do think that Georgia will pull it out. So let's say that goes Georgia's way, 31-20 against Alabama.
Okay. Well, I kind of agree with you on that particular game, Alex. I think Georgia is going to be the winner because of the home field. I think, but Alabama is definitely discovering itself, and they're a better football team than the one that played earlier in the year, and so it's going to be a close game. But after watching Georgia's team in that Tennessee game, have
Right.
score lights out, but also give up a lot of points. I mean, Tennessee was scoring on them at will. It almost seemed like that. I think it's going to be a very high scoring game. I think it's going to be more like 45 to 38 with Georgia on top.
Yeah, Tennessee, that was the game I was thinking of. So you may be right
Yeah,
there. And then Oregon Penn State, I just looked this up because I was curious. Oregon has played the tougher schedule so far, right? Because they played against Oklahoma State and beat them solidly, as we mentioned. They beat Northwestern. Interestingly, that was a closer game, 34-14. And then they beat Oregon State just now 41-7. Whereas Penn State hasn't really played anybody of note. But interestingly, Penn State had their bye going into this week. They did not play anybody. So they've had 2 weeks to prepare for Oregon, and it's at home for Penn State, which you would think would give them an edge.
oh yes, it definitely should give them an edge. But the bye week does not. A bye week that early in the season, just like our bye week here this week, having it early when you haven't had a lot of accumulated wear and tear. Oftentimes, the players would rather play again, especially if they felt like they didn't play well their previous week or whatever. And I think Penn State's kind of underperformed in the games they've played so far. So I got to believe that both the coaches and players at Penn State don't feel like they have even come close to their, playing on smoothly. And so it'll be interesting to see because I after watching Oregon, I feel like Oregon has the horsepower to be the number one team in the country, and so I think Oregon's going to win this football game, even though it's very very tough to beat a quality Penn State team in Happy Valley. I'm going to predict that that's what's going to happen.
I just looked it up. So currently, Penn State is 3.5 favorites. So when you factor
Okay,
in the 3 points of it being the home game, Vegas says it's pretty much dead even. Um,
right.
but you're sort of thinking kind of like how those buys that the top 4 seeds got in the playoff last year almost seemed like a detriment because the teams
Right.
that didn't have the buys were playing better. And when they played in round 2, you think it might be a similar situation here?
I do. I do. Yeah. I mean, basically you've only played. I mean, that's basically saying they played 3 games and they had a bye
Right.
to get to this fourth game, and so I'm just thinking that's so early in the season. You don't want to have that week off because you don't have enough to work on. You do much better to just play another opponent and get more film that you can use for your team to get better with, through the coaching and stuff, and young people just playing. So I you know, the environment at Penn State will be off the charts, I'm sure, and that's going to be tough. But Oregon's, this is their second rodeo now of going through the Big Ten conference. I think they're going to be more prepared for that, and I think they're the more talented team. So we'll see. But going into the season, I thought Penn State would be more dominant. So that's the other part of this. That's why I'm leaning to Oregon, and I think it's going to be, I'm going to say 38-28, Oregon.
Well, I do agree with you that I think Oregon is very talented, and I think they are one of the best teams in the country. But I'm gonna put some trust in James Franklin, even though he has had a tendency to choke in big game moments like this. That with that extra week of planning, that will give him and his staff, time to come up with some extra schemes and trick plays and things of that nature. So where maybe, the bye isn't that helpful from the player's perspective, from the coach's perspective, maybe it's helpful from the strategy perspective of just drilling your guys more and more on these specific plays and really diving into,
Right.
Oregon's play calling and everything. So I'm going to assume that with that, plus the night game atmosphere there at Penn State, that Penn State pulls it off. But it will be a close game. So let's say that they win 35 Penn State to 28 Oregon.
That sounds like a good score.
Yeah. So, yeah, we've got some fun college football to look forward to this week, even though our Huskers have the bye. And I actually, I think it's good, like you say, maybe it's not an ideal position for us to have a bye week, but I think it is good after kind of the tough loss to Michigan, another one-score loss, which Nebraska fans have become all too accompanied with or familiar with, as have the players. But I think this gives them some time to lick their wounds. After that offensive line got beat up so badly by Michigan, it'll be good for them to heal a bit and really drill some things in practice to work on what they were messing up before, and prep to play against a Michigan State team that lost solidly to USC, but also, didn't get blown out either. So they're a team
Right.
that we have to take seriously.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that I was actually surprisingly impressed by Michigan State's running game and their quarterback play. Man, I mean, it just seemed like they just kept hanging in there, kept hanging in there, kept hanging in there, and I think it was fairly clear that that USC had more talent and was the more talented football team, but Michigan State played hard and kept finding ways to, grind out first downs and just keep them in it.
So we'll obviously come back to you next week to give our full predictions for that Michigan State game and see what's happened to the world of college football, see if any other major coach gets fired in the next week, see if we keep that track record going.
My goodness.
Yeah, so we hope you out there enjoyed listening to this podcast. You can email us at collegefootballthrowdown@gmail.com. You can also find us if you search for College Football Throwdown on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave us a comment or a review there. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. So thank you out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.